Hello to those joining us. We are just getting set up with our Facebook live stream, and we'll be starting with Rachel Yoder in just a minute. Okay, for those just joining us, we are just getting ready to share this on our Facebook, and we will get started in just a moment. For those of us joining us, we're just waiting for a Facebook live stream to start so our friends can join us. We're just about there. Thanks for your patience. And we are live on Facebook. Excellent. Hello, I'm Rebecca Zorno, a Fox Cities Book Festival board member, and I'd like to welcome you to the 14th annual Fox Cities Book Festival and today's event, In Conversation with Rachel Yoder. We're happy to have you here with us virtually today and look forward to gathering in person again next fall. The Fox Cities Book Festival continues to be offered for free to all of our community members. Today's program will be available for viewing after the live event on our Facebook page. The Fox Cities Book Festival is organized by a group of dedicated volunteers and community partners, including public libraries, school districts and universities, bookstores, and individuals giving of their time and talents. We're able to provide these great events without financial barriers thanks to our generous donors and sponsors. They understand the value that access to the arts has on our greater community. If you think that supporting local writers, building an engaged community of readers, introducing students to authors, and bringing educational and arts events to our community is important, we encourage you to support the Fox Cities Book Festival. The Fox Cities Book Festival is only possible because of our sponsors. We ask that during the presentation today, You follow our code of conduct as a good digital citizen. Any harassment or disrespectful behavior or language will cause you to be removed from today's event. During the presentation, you will have an opportunity to ask questions of our speaker during the Q&A function in Zoom. You can type your questions there, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible in the time we have together. For those of you joining us on Facebook, you can leave your questions in the comments section of the Facebook Live video. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest today. Rachel Yoder is the author of Nightbitch, which has been optioned for film by Annapurna with Amy Adams set to star. She is a graduate of the Iowa Nonfiction Writing Program and also holds an MFA in fiction from the University of Arizona. Her writing has been awarded with the Editor's Prize in Fiction by the Missouri Review and with notable distinctions in Best American Short Stories and Best American Non-Required Reading. She is also a founding editor of Draft, the Journal of Process. Rachel grew up in the Mennonite community in the Appalachian foothills of Eastern Ohio. She now lives in Iowa City with her husband and son. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure to be here.
We were so glad to have you as part of this year's book festival. And to start with, I believe you have a reading chosen to share.
Yeah, I was going to read from the beginning, but I think I'll pop just a tiny bit into the book. This is
Excellent.
The book, Nightbitch, good old Nightbitch with her meaty hands on the front. And this is a part where the mother, who thinks something peculiar may be happening to her body, she's afraid she's turning into a dog. She's at the grocery store and she's just having a moment at the grocery store. Lots of things are happening inside her. She's sort of mulling over her lot in life. So yeah, just a taste. Her sense that society, adulthood, marriage, motherhood, all these things were somehow masterfully designed to put a woman in her place and keep her there. This idea had begun to weigh on the mother. Of course, it had crossed her mind before, but after her son arrived, it took on a new shape, an unwieldy heft. And then, even more, after she quit her job, as her body struggled to regain equilibrium. And once she was stripped of all she had been, of her career, her comely figure, her ambition, her familiar hormones, an anti-feminist conspiracy seemed not only plausible, but nearly inevitable. She needed to get cat food and other groceries that day, and she did not want to get cat food and other groceries, but she went to get them anyway. At the grocery store, she could not get out from inside this thinking that she was trapped, that it was all a plot, and she spiraled into an even worse mood. She wondered whether she was being hysterical as she wheeled the cart through the produce and past the deli. That was the last thing she wanted to be. She had always prided herself on not being a hysterical woman, but rather a smart woman with good points who sometimes got a little upset, but was mostly cool to hang out with. Of course, she knew that the concept of, quote, the hysterical woman was itself a sexist creation, and she rejected the label altogether, but she also made sure no one would ever associate her with such a label to begin with. The boy, her son, babbled cookie, cookie, cookie from his seat in the cart, then did his sign for please, rubbing both of his palms up and down on his chest and looking at her with big eyes. She smiled and touched his nose and meandered distractedly toward the bakery department. It wasn't hysteria if the claim one was hysterical about was true, if the systems of which one was a part were set up from the start to put women at a disadvantage. Yes, certainly, her emerging rage was in part a byproduct of physiological processes, but how could you not be pissed after having a baby, she wondered, as she picked up a wedge of cheese and sniffed it, registering a depth of smell hitherto unknown to her. Hay, smoke, honey, a fungal musk, a sweet rotten tang. Amazing, she thought as she set it back down. A premenstrual sensitivity, she told herself, even though what she feared, with a sharp realization, was that this was yet another canine development, this heightened sense which only grew stronger and stronger as she moved through the store, the ripe yeasts of the bakery, the baking soda and bitter cocoa of the boy's chocolate chip cookie, the milks in all states of freshness and souring, vinegar from the olive bar, the deadened fields of grass in the bagged bread aisle, high sharp notes of fresh coffee grounds. She was alive in a new way as she walked about the store, the boy's happy face covered in chocolate. She smelled the dark tea and damp dirt of the aged urine in his diaper, then the salt and green of the seafood section. The boy liked to look at the lobsters in the tank, claws banded, wallowing in a pile in the murky water. They stopped to watch the animals tumbling over each other and knocking against the glass. The grocery store is a locus of oppression, she thought.
That is such an excellent passage to share, because I feel like that, and throughout the whole book, there's these strong phrases, these sentences that just have so much voice. As I read it, I found myself texting friends like, oh, I just have to send this sentence off because it just strikes you so to the heart, and you really understand where Nightbitch is, who is mother at this point in the novel. Can you tell me a little bit about building those scenes? There's so many sensory qualities that she's starting to develop.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the book sort of starts off as just a raging voice, the raging voice of Nightbitch. And so I knew I didn't want it to just be a manifesto or a screed, and it had to like move into this scene work. And yeah, and I guess it was really interesting to just return very specifically to the senses, because I feel like a part of her transformation would obviously be this, her senses gaining this acuteness as she's transforming into something that, into going more into her animal body, that she becomes more like attuned to, the sensory world around her. So yeah, just thinking how distracting and what a kind of symphonic but of olfactory experience it would be to be at the grocery store. It was really fun to just kind of take these sort of, quotidian destinations where she would be going and say, okay, how do these become electrified when we go like even deeper into like her sensory body. And it was nice because, being in her head and being in her consciousness is pretty intense. So then it's nice to kind of move over to the scene work and just the pure senses and the dialogue.
Mm-hmm. And how did you choose Nightbitch as both like the character name and the name of your book? How did you settle on that? And were there any other contenders you were playing with during the process?
Well, she was always Nightbitch from the start, which I knew, would maybe be hard in terms of selling it or marketing it. It's sort of a hurdle to get over from the cover, you're either in or out from the title.
Well, and so many of us are so in. So I think that your gut instinct there was really
yeah, it's kind of like self-select. It's like if you are okay with the cover and the title, you're probably gonna be okay with the book. So it's selecting out. Yeah, and it never really was anything else, and the mother never really had a name. And I think, part of it was because I was kind of, I was interested in fairy tale and myth and sort of archetypes, working with the archetype of mother and father and child. But I think too, the book was so deeply personal that, and was dealing like with real like painful personal tensions that I was dealing with in my own life, that I really needed to make the character like, I needed some psychic room between myself and the character. So having her not have a name, having her be called Nightbitch, which is just like, this not even really a name, I think gave me some space, right? I needed to make her other. And it was like a really good way of kind of othering her from myself as the author.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to dive into the book a bit more, but I have a few questions about genre. And I think probably we have a mix of people in the audience. I think many people have read it. Many people, this is on their reading list, and they're going to take what you say today into their reading. But I think one thing we all do know about Nightbitch is this quote that we see: an outrageously original novel of ideas about art, power, and womanhood, wrapped in a satirical fairy tale. And every time I saw this online, it's this outrageously original novel, and it really is. And I was wondering, was genre something that you considered while writing? Was it something that came into play at all during the early processes?
Um, was it something I considered? I guess it's something I considered in that I didn't, it wasn't a consideration. So I studied, I got an MFA in fiction and in nonfiction. And I feel like when I was getting my MFA in nonfiction, um, we were really encouraged to sort of stop thinking about like genre, like fiction, nonfiction, poetry as discrete genres, which really did something for my writing, right? It like allowed my writing a sort of freedom that it hadn't had before. Um, and then as I started to read more slipstream stuff, so like Kelly Link, who's kind of like writing short stories, but they're a little spooky and they're borrowing from horror and fairy tale. And then when I read Carmen Maria Machado's Her Body and Other Parties, really blew my mind because it was this just exploration and merging of all different sorts of genres. And that was the sort of like unbridled spirit that I brought to Nightbitch, which, when I started writing it, I thought it was a collection of essays. And then I thought it was a collection of short stories. And then it was neither of those, but material I had written for both of those got folded in to the novel. So I really see it as being sort of like a mulch pile, where I kind of bring in a sort of literary sensibility, but then also bring in the sort of playfulness from fairy tales. And there's also sort of like a body horror aspect to it. I like to say it's like an auto fiction werewolf mom book because it's like, how can it be an auto fiction werewolf mom book? But that's kind of what it is. And so I thought about, how can I blow apart genre? I think that's kind of
Mhm.
been my artistic question of late, is how do I sort of write against genre, and write in a way that allows me to kind of go anywhere and do anything, which,
Mhm.
maybe again is not great for marketing, but I think Doubleday has figured out how to market it. So it wasn't too big of a problem.
Yeah, yeah. I think unbridled is definitely the word to use when it comes to genre, because it is so many things and you feel that while you're reading it. Um, Tell us more about that voice through the project. So you mentioned that you had started with essays and it started as all of these things coming together. When you read the finished product, like Nightbitch's voice comes through so strongly. Was that voice eminent early on, or how did it change while you were writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in the essays and there's a short story called The Loaf, which you can read online at Guernica. The Loaf is an early part of this project that got cut off and turned in to a short story. And the voice there is much more, there's a narrator narrating a story. So Nightbitch wasn't quite there yet. And I think I actually found the voice more through essays because, essays are such a great occasion, a great opportunity to speak for you, to speak as the writer, to use I, to create this authorial self. So I think I actually wrote. There's a passage about her in the lactation room at work before she quits her job, and I was like, oh, I'm going to write an essay about pumping, and just what a shit show that was when I was working. And so I started writing that essay, and that was actually the first part of the book, what wound up becoming the book. And there's a sort of fieriness in there, a sort of
Mhm.
manifesto, someone who's ranting. And I think that that sense of ranting, um, that became tied to Nightbitch, and the sort of fire that she had, the self-righteous sort of rant, that became her voice.
Yeah, that's interesting that you started with a narrator, because I feel like we have so much intimacy with the mother character, and getting such a close look into how she is feeling and how she is responding to everything in her day is so authentic.
Mm.
Um, I think that that really speaks to people reading. It feels even more intimate without that narrator division. So Nightbitch is this artist who has lost some of her time, some of her space to herself, some of her connection with her creativity as she's delved into the early years of motherhood. Um, and that wasn't just like a, hey, I'm gonna, write on my character development sheet. She was an artist. It was so inherent in who she was and her personality. And the art world peppers the novel. There's so many great details about the people in her circle she talks to, and what role they play in her creative field. Can you talk a bit more about how the visual arts inspire and inform your writing?
Sure. Well, there was a very direct inspiration for Nightbitch. I was in 2017. I was an Iowa Arts Fellow. I received a grant from the state of Iowa along with four other artists. We traveled around Iowa. I was the only writer. So I was with a sculptor, musician, a filmmaker, and a painter. And it was really my first time sort of being in cahoots with, studio artists and artists in other disciplines. And I was just really inspired to see what they were doing and also hear them talk about, their processes, um, and their ideas behind their art. And there was one artist in particular named Lee Running, who was working with roadkill, would find roadkill along the roads in Iowa, clean the bones. This might sound familiar. And then she had this whole process she did where she would carve them with jeweler's tools and inlay them with gold, and reconstruct these like gorgeous, haunting deer skeletons that then wound up, in museum spaces.
Mm.
And I was so taken with her and with just what she was doing and why she was doing it. And it felt like it, and also like the care with which she was doing it. It was almost like this sort of motherly care to like take these bodies and treat them with, spend so much time with them and handle them and treat them in this way. And so there was just something there that really resonated, and that became, the artwork that Nightbitch is doing in the book. um, and so that was sort of an animating spirit. The animating spirit of her artwork was again like something very early that got me into the character. And then it was just really amazing to be able, um, to have the occasion and reason to dive into, early feminist performance art, and just see all of the women who were doing really interesting things, 40, 50 years ago. And to think about, okay, like what are they doing if we're animals? And like there's a naked woman in a room, and it's packed with all these people, and she's like inviting people to come up and like do things to her body. Like what is this? Like what is happening? And that sort of, me just being really like fascinated and kind of puzzled by that was also, something that was working its way through the book, and informing too, like Nightbitch's journey with her own art, and her thinking about what is art, what could my art be. And I did have this question too as I was going through, like as the transformation started with her, I was like, oh, is this just her art? Is this like her being an artist, or is this her going mad? And I liked that as a question. And so that drove me through the book too.
It drove us through the book too. We did have the same question. Rachel, have you ever done performance art or anything of that nature?
I'm not cool enough. I would love to. I think it's so, yeah. I think studio artists and performance artists are so cool, but no, I've never done anything like that.
Yeah, it was great, slowly coming to understand more and more about her previous art process, and that she has so many different types of artists in her life, and talking about these happenings and these performative pieces, and it's just all layered so beautifully as we're watching Nightbitch descend into whatever she is experiencing. Um, in addition to the visual arts, you also had a really strong influence of the written arts in your book as well, because we see a field guide to magical women by Wanda White, which is basically a book within your book. You created two wonderful books for us. What was that like, creating that text to include?
Really fun. And I had to tell myself I'm not writing a field guide to magical women. I'm writing because I did want to just like veer off and go do that. I have another novel project that I abandoned, and there is also like a text within a text in that project, which I wanted to go off and write that text. So I guess this is one of my ticks that I now must watch out for. But yeah, it was really fun, and I was writing the book in 1,000-word sections. So I had I had a toddler. Because of the Iowa Arts Grant, I had money for childcare. That's actually another big piece of the story, is that there was no money for me to put him in childcare for 2 or 3 hours a day. So I could write. I got this grant, and I could take him over to daycare for 3 hours and go to the coffee shop and write 1,000 words. So that's like how the book happened. It would not have happened if not for that. So yeah, I was writing it in very regimented sections. And those little entries in Wanda White's book are like flash fiction. They're like about 1,000 words, 500 to 1,000 words. You can write them in one sitting. And those were like the treats I would allow myself. If I, reached a goal, I could write another Wanda White section, or if I was having a bad writing day, maybe I would go and just play around and do that. Because there are some other entries that didn't make the book. So yeah, that was really fun. And I think when Wanda White showed up, it was a relief too, because she's, this voice of wisdom. She's the crone, and she is a way different vibe to Nightbitch. She's trying to sort of balance her out a little bit, but someone who Nightbitch can turn to in her rage for a little bit of solace, or for something that's helping her shift out of her rage or transform her rage. So I liked it when Wanda got on the scene.
I think we all did as readers. It was really fascinating reading about these other magical women and magical mothers around the world. And they were really beautiful looks at how different places and societies might, imagine this transformation of women. But as we read through the novel and we got more and more of them, I think that as readers, we all feel that like, wow, we want this like wise woman in our life, like Wanda White, like she's there doing the good work, studying all these magical women around the world. And it's almost like you fall in love with her because she seems like she will have all of the answers, and she seems so open and compassionate. So it was a really wonderful thing to experience reading her voice in the novel too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I also had this backstory in my head about Wanda that, maybe the book itself is a piece of performance art, right? And that Wanda White, and I think it was even more in the book this way. And I think I pulled back, but that she's this performance artist, and this book is the relic that kind of like mysteriously travels around through libraries, and you can't find her. And so having the book be also this performance that's happening, I thought was an interesting way of looking at it. That, I mean, it doesn't, that's just me kind of projecting into the book, but I don't think it's necessarily there for readers.
You mentioned a few authors already. Are there any books that have in your own personal life like fulfilled this role that, you know, Wanda White has done for Nightbitch? Like, has there been anything that you've read in the last 5 years that has really hit home and helped guide you on your journey?
Yeah. I mean, over the past year, I've been reading this book it's of Louise Bourgeois, who's an artist, very famous artist. It's her notebooks, so it'll be a drawing and then just a little thing she's written about the drawing, which is usually quite cryptic and bizarre and psychological. So that has been very Wanda White-ish to me, reading through that and sort of spending time and meditating on that. I mean, another writer who is sort of a Wanda White to me is Miriam Taves, who she has a new book out called Fight Night, but she also, I grew up in a Mennonite community and she did too. And so she's also sort of looking at, like larger tensions that we are a part of that, bind us, and how to kind of escape those. And the fight in her Fight Night in this book is very much about these characters like fighting in very like quotidian ways, for their agency and for the right to speak and for the right to exist. And I think that is also something that like Nightbitch has taken up, like how do I kind of like fight for who I want to be and for my agency. So yeah, those are the two off the top of my head. I also think Mary Ruefle is sort of a Wanda White character for me. She has this great book called The Most of It, which is little prose poems and very strange and magical. And that book has really affected my writing.
Good. Thank you for those great suggestions. We have a question that'll segue nicely, but just a reminder to everybody participating today, both on Zoom and Facebook, go ahead and start sending your questions through to now. We'd love to get to them soon. Rachel, Nightbitch is so aware of the roles that women are expected to play in society. Do you have suggestions on how anyone can begin to challenge these expectations?
No. I mean, I think, for me, when I became a mom, for many reasons, my husband and I just sort of went on autopilot in terms of who does what and how our life's going to look, because, we were stressed and busy and, like a lot of like money pressure. So just like survive, right? Make it through. And I think what we've come to realize is that, if you want to sort of subvert those gender roles, it takes work. It takes like negotiation, and it takes really like digging into it and negotiating it with like the people around you, as opposed to kind of running on autopilot, which probably seems very obvious. But
no, it is work. And having those conversations, I think defending ourselves as women and carving out that space for us, it's unfortunate that it takes work, but if we don't do the work, then I mean, we don't get it. And I was really interested to hear about the grant that you mentioned earlier, specifically for childcare, so that you could write this novel. And that was something that you did for yourself to be able to give this book to the rest of us. And that takes work to then be aware and apply and do all of these things just to have time to get this this project out there.
Exactly. And it's I mean, I think it's a constant negotiation, and I think it, you can get tired of talking about it, but I do think like the work is endless, and like to constantly be saying like you need money for, like, it's necessary for moms to have childcare. Like like when I was applying for grants, I was always like, this will go for childcare, even if that's like, even if I feel weird putting that on a grant application. I told myself, no, I'm going to normalize this. Like every grant application, like this is going to be on it, because this is what, artists who are mothers need. Like, and it shouldn't be viewed as not a viable, like cost for their project, because like how else are they going to get their work done? So just stuff like that, where I'm also confronting my own sort of like internalized misogyny or icky feeling of like, oh, I can't possibly put this. It's like, no, like this is my life. This is how it is. And just, yeah, just constantly like reiterating that wherever I'm going, like that this is how the life of an artist who also happens to be a mother is, or who also happens to be a father is. And it's not as if our children disappear when we go to make art, and usually it's the opposite. So
right, that's when they appear and they need everything.
Exactly. Yes.
Good. Well, I'm going to tell all my visual artist friends and writer friends, like, yes, normalize it. Like, we need to do the work.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the readers and members of the book festival board and some of our participants I've heard of who have read your novel have been not all, but mostly women. Do you think that so like as women coming to this novel, especially if you watching today are a mother, there's so much there's like truth in every line as you read through it, and like you recognize your own experience. Do you get the sense, Rachel, that there's a population of men reading this novel as well that maybe are seeing things differently, or this is an opportunity to understand something that maybe was opaque before?
I mean, I hope so. I mostly hear from women. I do hear from women who say, I'm going to make my husband read this. I have heard from a few men, and and also fathers who are like, I get this too. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think that probably a lot of men are coming to it via their wives, because I can see, I've had a fair amount of friends be like, this is great, but my husband really needs to read it, and like pushing it on their husbands. So yeah, I don't know. I would love to know more about, if there are any men here who have read it. I'd love to know more about your takes on the book too.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting, as the book is fairly new, as it gains more and more and more readers, and then also that it was optioned for film. That's going to reach a whole nother group of people too, and it'll be interesting watching how this discussion changes through the years around Nightbitch.
Sure.
I do have a question about the son. We've talked a lot about the mother. He was really interesting to watch throughout the book too, because you get the sense that he's a pretty content kid, but it does feel like he is maybe growing more happy and comfortable as his mother is growing and becoming more comfortable with herself. Hypothetically, do you think the main piece of this journey for Nightbitch is over, or do you think this is something that her and her family are going to be returning to, and how the son's perspective of his mother changes throughout his life, if he's always going to be as happy to play doggy and happy to be a part of her work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably just the beginning for this family, of negotiating to full adult lives along with a child, and how that works, and what the what the conversations and work around that are. And I think too, for the son and the mother who are, some have described as over bonded, which strikes me as correct, sort of over bonded, that I think that too is always, going to be a tension for them, like in terms of her work, and going away, like how to leave him and how to come back is going to be this constant practice for them, I think. But we do see, though, when she is working and when she has her creative space, that she's a happier mom, and the boy is a happier boy, and their bond seems to actually become better adjusted when the mom is better adjusted. Funny how that happens. um, yeah, so I think, I mean, I don't think it ever really ends, and kids keep changing. Every year is a new year and kind of a new kid. So yeah, I think they're on the journey. I think for the better, not for worse. They're on the journey, and yeah, just the beginning.
Yeah. Another character that we saw grow quite a bit was Jen. At the beginning of the book, we know a few things about her, that she's this, blonde mother of twins, and she's one of those people who always seems to have it all together, has the friend circle, has, the successful life and business, and the kids are well dressed and organized. But we see her go through some big changes as well, questioning where she is going. What do you think she finds in Nightbitch that helps her realize the changes that she wants to see in her life?
Yeah, I think what Jen appreciates about Nightbitch is that Nightbitch isn't, at a certain point, she's no longer hiding herself, that there's a sort of authenticity, weirdness and authenticity to her, as she, starts to look different. Her hair's never brushed, and her clothes are like ripped linen, and she's dirty, and her kids dirty. Like there's this sense that she will allow others to see her as she really is. And I think Jen is very much about image, and about what others see, and creating this perfect facade. And so then to be confronted with someone who's rejected that is very, like provocative for her. And I
Mhm.
think that's what draws her toward Nightbitch, is that sort of authenticity that maybe she, because she has her own things with which she's discontent in her life, and has some secrets about her MLM business that she doesn't feel she can reveal. Like there's an inauthenticity to what she's doing that eventually comes out, and so then they are able to join forces.
Which is kind of a beautiful switch, because at the beginning we see Jen as, oh, everybody wants to be Jen. Who wants to be the mother who is, suffering and facing so much? But really, by Nightbitch coming into her own, she has so much then that Jen looks at that and sees, like, I want to be as strong as she is, and I want to, be, I want to know as much about myself as she does. And I think that was a wonderful switch to see throughout the book.
Well, yeah, and
Rachel?
Nightbitch also, like, there's stuff about Jen that she wishes, like she does wish that she kind of had it all together like Jen, and could, talk to anyone, and, have a community of, like have friends. There's, they both sort of like yearn for what the other has. So I wanted them to be able to get together in the end.
Yeah. I do have a comment to share from Gavin on Facebook. He says, Can we acknowledge how badass Miss Yoder is for having Zap comics on display? So if everybody looks in the lower left corner, we see a stack of comics.
You know what? I have to admit, this is so my husband is actually the curator of our sizable comics and like graphic books collections. There's like a whole wall over there too. So I will let Seth know that you gave a shout out to his. We also have, I don't know if you guys are familiar with these. I'll just a quick detour. Chick tracts. These are like what people on the street will hand out. We also have an entire fruit bowl full of chick tracts. So
Wow.
if you guys
Yep.
ever want to come over and check them out, we've got a whole menagerie of stuff here.
It looks like it. We also have a question from the group. The themes of your book have turned out to be timely given the pandemic. Do you think this time is opening people's eyes to the roles women and moms play and how we as a society need to better support them?
Yes, I do think it is. I think people's eyes have been opened, were opened already, and it's something we weren't paying attention to. Like I just think about my best friend's dad, who's an older boomer, hearing about my book and being like, "Oh, yeah, that'll, I know that one. I know that song, right?" And it's like, yeah, of course you do. Of course you know that song because we've been singing it for decades and no one's been listening. Um, so yeah, I think yes, it is opening people's eyes, and hopefully it's also mobilizing people. I think we do see that there's movement now for universal paid leave, right? There's some stuff happening in the legislature, so I hope that this is going to keep pushing for universal paid leave, like we actually start to see some changes instead of us just talking and talking and talking. But I do think that opening up the conversation and talking about it incessantly and not letting it go is the first step to sort of changing the whole culture around it and saying, no, this isn't something we talk about and then forget about and say, yeah, we know. It's like, let's actually make some changes so that we can support mothers.
Well, and I think that one of the things that Nightbitch does is, yes, it sings that old song, of course, but it's also very inspirational. And I can imagine a lot of people reading it thinking about Nightbitch's journey and how ridiculous some of the expectations that we put on the mother and women in our society, and being able to step back and see how Nightbitch finds it within herself to respond and how her and her family are better for it. This was a really great novel for us to choose for the book festival this year because it's not only a wonderful literary story and the writing is strong and witty, and as a book it stands so strongly, but also that it has this really powerful and timely, I don't know if I want to say message, but it does have so many timely thoughts behind it, and it's provoking us and it's jabbing us. And when you have both of those sides of wonderful literature coming together, you have a really powerful book that causes people to move to action.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to hear too from people who say, oh, my kids are in their teens, but reading this was really triggering. Like it took me back to the early day, to when they were young. Yeah, and I have been really surprised because I wrote this out of my own sort of hopelessness and isolation, not thinking, just thinking it was like my own idiosyncratic experience. And of course it's not. Like, why did I think, like it's that so many people are like, this came directly out of my brain. Like, how did you do that? I'm like, I didn't know. We were all feeling so isolated and so lonely. Like that has been sort of a revelation for me, and has just shown me like how important it is for us to just like to talk to each other. And if this book is nothing more than an occasion for us to like begin to tell each other we're lonely, and isolated in parenthood, like that is huge. So yeah, I mean, I've heard it's hard for some readers to get through because it's triggering, which I can also understand. It was hard for me to like dive back into it to promote, because I'm like, whoa, so many feelings.
Mhm.
Yeah, it can be a lot.
Yeah, I see how that could, it raises a lot of questions and a lot of emotions and how that could be difficult, but it is also building community and allowing people the, I guess, the validation that it's not just hard for me. I'm not the quote bad mom, or there's not, something wrong with the way that like I have done things or chosen to do things or whatever, but that there's this larger societal context to it. And it's almost like through reading it, you can find your space within that, and that it's okay that things happen hard, because it is hard. And there's validation in that, which I think is very powerful. Yeah. Rachel, you said in an interview that writing was an act of self-creation. What do you hope to create of yourself next?
In my future writing?
Yes.
That's a great question. Uh, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I'm sort of interested in looking at some stories that maybe I've abandoned from my past. For the last 25 years, people have told me I need to write about being Mennonite. I need to write about growing up Mennonite. And it is not something I've ever been able to write about. I don't know what to say about it. I don't know what the story is. And now it's only now finally in midlife that I'm like, okay, maybe I can go back and sort of recreate that girl who was Mennonite and left the Mennonites, and see what's going on with that. Because I do think it's interesting when you talk about writing as self-creation or storytelling as self-creation, is that I had a story about what happened in my 20s, about who I was and what happened. And it keeps changing, right? And the story I have now about who I was and what happened is very different. And so it's interesting to see like the evolution of the stories we tell about ourselves and how we define ourselves. So I think that seems really interesting to me right now. And maybe after 2 decades, I will finally be able to write a little bit about being Mennonite moving forward.
I think as readers, and we have so many wonderful dedicated readers in the Fox Cities who come to the book festival every year. But I think as readers, sometimes we think that, the writer, they're just going to tell a story, and we don't acknowledge how difficult and hard it is for writers to tell stories that are hard and so much truth. So it sounds like you might potentially have more work to do as a writer, but as readers, we're very grateful for the stories that you share, and also know we're here for you to read whatever you have coming out next.
Well, thanks. Yes, I mean, a book would not be a book without readers. It would just, be a little file on my computer. So I so appreciate that. Anyone who's in relationship with Nightbitch.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, we are going to wrap up right on time, which is a different, kind of miracle for us. But it really was a pleasure having you on, Rachel. And thank you to everybody who came today to all of the events that we've had over the past few days, but especially to this one. This is really a very powerful book, and I'm glad that we could all gather here today virtually to discuss and think and share on some of these themes. The festival does continue through this evening. We have a lot of great events coming up. So if you want to visit foxcitiesbookfestival.org or the events page on Facebook, you can see who is still yet to come today. If you would like to support future festival events, free and open to the public, we encourage you to visit our website to make a donation. We will also ask you to take a brief survey. You will receive that after this event so that we can begin planning for the 2022 Fox Cities Book Festival. So thank you, Rachel. Do you have any words to end the session with?
I don't think so. Just thanks so much for the great conversation, and thanks to people who are reading and enjoying Nightbitch. If you get a chance, drop me a line. I always love to hear from readers. So thanks so much.
And how best can people do that? Through your website?
Yep, through my website. There's just like a little form, and people think they go to some like fantasy assistant I have, which no, they just come to me. So you can just fill out the little form and they'll come right to me.
Excellent. Well, thank you all, and thank you for helping us connect with our literary community here in the Fox Cities. Bye.